What if the reward for your greatest victory is a desire to simply disappear? What if, after you have poured your entire being into a project, a relationship, or a cause, the only thing left is a hollow, aching emptiness? This is the strange and secret grief of spiritual exhaustion, a burnout of the soul. It feels deeply wrong, doesn't it? We feel guilty for our own weariness. But the soul knows. It simply cannot take another step. Before we delve into this feeling, I want to gently remind you that this reflection is a step on a longer path we are walking together. Our creative collective believes that to find true rest, we must first have the courage to name our deepest weariness. This is the first arc of our journey, a sacred space for the weary soul. If this resonates, stay with us. We believe the whisper at the end is worth waiting for. Let us begin with a prayer for the exhausted heart. Lord, I have had enough. Be my shelter. Be my bread. Be my quiet whisper. Amen. There is an ancient story that gives us permission to feel this way, a mirror to our own moments of burnout. It reminds us that even the greatest of prophets can find themselves sitting under a juniper tree, asking God to let them die. This is the story of Elijah. To understand his crash, we must first understand his victory. Picture Mount Carmel, a spiritual showdown. Elijah, a lone prophet, stands against 450 prophets of Baal. He is bold and fiery. He calls upon the Lord. Fire falls from heaven, a consuming fire. The people fall on their faces, crying, "The Lord, He is God." He prays again, and a 3-year drought ends in a torrent of rain. This is the peak, the absolute summit of a life of faith. He should be celebrating. But that is not what happens next. The wicked Queen Jezebel sends a single threat, and Elijah, the man who called down fire from heaven, runs. How can this be? How can the hero of Mount Carmel be so terrified? Because burnout is not logical. It is the utter depletion of all our reserves. He had poured out everything. He had nothing left. In that hollowed-out state, the smallest threat felt like an insurmountable mountain. Have you ever known that feeling? When a single, small problem feels like the final straw. That is the language of burnout after success. Elijah runs a day's journey into the wilderness. The landscape of his outer world now matches his inner world. Barren, empty. He comes to a lone broom tree, and he sits down under it, and he prays. Not for strength, not for a miracle. I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. This is the cry of a soul that has reached its absolute end. And how does God respond to this prayer of despair? Does he send a lecture, a rebuke? Number. He does something radically gentle. First, he lets Elijah sleep. He honors his body's desperate need for rest. Then, an angel touches him. Get up and eat. And there by his head was a cake of bread baked on hot coals and a jar of water. Simple food, warm bread, cool water. God's first response to our despair is not a theological treatise. It is a warm meal. He knows we cannot hear his whisper when our bodies are screaming with neglect. He knows we are dust, and he treats us with an infinite, motherly tenderness. Sometimes, the most spiritual thing we can do is take a nap and nourish our bodies. This is the theology of sleep. Elijah eats and drinks, and then he lay down again. The healing was not instant. It was slow. If you are in a season of burnout, Let this story be a permission slip from God. Permission to rest, to sleep, to be, without guilt. If this gave you a little air, leave a quiet sign, a simple like. So the algorithm understands that weariness too is important. The angel came back a second time. Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. What grace is in these words? God is not saying, you should be stronger. He is saying, I see this is hard. Let me give you what you need. Strengthened by that food, Elijah traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. He has been physically restored, and only now is he ready for the spiritual encounter his soul craves. He goes into a cave, and the word of the Lord comes to him. Again, a gentle question. What are you doing here, Elijah? God knows, of course, but he wants Elijah to give voice to the pain, and Elijah pours it all out. I have been very zealous. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. It is a story of isolation and futility. I worked so hard, and for what? And then God tells him to go out and stand on the mountain. A tremendous wind tore the mountains apart. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a still, small voice. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face. He knew. This was it, the true presence. The God he was seeking is not in the earthquake that shatters our world. He is in the quiet that follows. He is not in the consuming fire of our victory. He is in the gentle whisper that restores our soul. After the burnout, after the running, comes the whisper. The whisper doesn't argue with the storm. It waits until you are able to hear. And the voice asks again, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah gives the same pained answer, and God's response is a gentle, practical course correction. He gives him new tasks, and most importantly, he answers Elijah's deepest fear, his loneliness. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, God says, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal. You are not alone, Elijah. Your work was not for nothing. But first, you needed to rest. You needed to eat. And you needed to learn to hear my voice, not in the fire, but in the stillness. This story is our story. It is the story of a God who meets us in our exhaustion with tenderness, not judgment. Who understands that after the fire, we need the whisper. If this way of seeing God, not as a demanding taskmaster, but as a gentle restorer, resonates with your soul, then perhaps this is your spiritual home. We invite you to subscribe, to join this quiet community that believes in the sacredness of rest, and to continue this journey with us toward the still waters. The lesson of the juniper tree is this: your weariness is not a sin. It is a signal to stop, to rest, to eat, to sleep, and to listen. Not for the earthquake, but for the whisper. He is there. If you are feeling under your own juniper tree today, if you feel you have had enough, you are in a holy place. If you would like, you can simply write a quiet whisper in the comments. This is our form of solidarity. Let us close with the prayer we began with. Lord, I have had enough. Be my shelter. Be my bread. Be my quiet whisper. Amen. He sees you. He has not forgotten you. Quiet now. Just breathe.